Top of the morning to you all. I'm Dominic Grew of Elevate Business Coaching,
And I'm Bob Furlong of the Bullfinch Group.
and we'd like to welcome you today to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold stories of lawyers, their triumphs, their trials. And really, it's all about exploring and narrating their compelling stories or briefs of lawyers that have experienced significant challenges and successes in their business. We want to know, what was their gap? What were they missing? What do they wish they'd known? And it's our pleasure today to welcome Marques Lipton, the founder, the owner, the man, Lipton Law Group, a Framingham, Massachusetts-based law firm that specializes in bankruptcy law. So, Marques, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Dom. How are you? Great to be
Awesome.
here.
Thanks for coming on today. We think you've got an interesting story, as we know, and we're looking forward to you telling us just a little bit about that story. So, not only interesting story, interesting practice area too. So, Marques, why don't you take a couple of minutes, tell us a little bit about your practice and the types of clients you serve, and then how you're different from others that are out there that provide the same types of services. Over to you.
Thanks. So, yeah, I've been primarily a bankruptcy attorney going on 15 years now. I graduated law school sort of in the depths of the great financial recession. Many
Hmm.
of my fellow graduates were having trouble finding careers in their fields of choice. I sort of fell backwards into the bankruptcy world. I was struggling to find work and really just cold calling some attorneys who I had done summer work for and during law school, offered free services to help them out with whatever they needed.
Hmm.
And it happened that I was in the conference room doing some work one day, and the attorney I was working for, a colleague of his, came in who I had met a year prior, and he asked what I was doing there, and I told him what was going on, and he said, "Oh, I probably have some work for you too. Give me your number." About a week later, he called me and said, "My good friend is a bankruptcy attorney, and he's got more work than he can handle," which was, you know, bankruptcy attorneys were the only people saying that at the time. And he
Right.
said, "I gave him your resume. He's going to call you." And that's how it worked out for me. I sort of went into my first job, feet to the fire.
Hmm.
There was a stack up to the ceiling of files that needed to be worked on. I didn't know the first thing about bankruptcy law. He said, "That doesn't matter. You're going to learn." And, I learned on the job pretty quickly, um, because there was just so much work to get done. We were
Yeah.
representing a lot of real estate investors whose investments had all kind of lost their value,
Hmm.
small business owners of every, color and stripe, and then just working folks who were, laid off, struggling with credit cards, facing foreclosures.
Hmm.
And initially, I thought, this isn't something I'm interested in. I didn't know anything about it. I was
Yeah.
like, this sounds, exotic to me. I don't think I want to be that kind of lawyer. But then as I started to learn about it, and I was just fascinated with how much you could do to help people who
Hmm.
were really with their backs against the wall. And I really was intrigued by the way you can sort of use the bankruptcy code, look at a problem, and analyze it, pull out the code book and say, okay, well, here's what it says exactly. And
Yeah.
maybe we can reposition your situation to make it
Right.
fit so that this case, you'll have a successful case. Or, you know, maybe it's not a good option to file this type of bankruptcy, but this other bankruptcy will work well for you. Or we need to reconfigure some aspect of your life before you can file bankruptcy. So I just enjoyed the problem solving puzzle aspect of it a
Yeah.
lot.
And,
Yeah.
and Marcus, what inspired you to go out on your own and have your own practice as opposed to working for a big law firm?
Well, I've never worked for a big law firm. I worked for a
Okay.
few small firms over the first 10 years of my career. And, I kind of realized that I could manage things just as well as anyone else. I have a great network of professional colleagues that refer me business. Um, and I felt like the work-life balance I would get working for myself would be a lot better than having to, meet billable hour goals for somebody else who was, um, really making money off of my labor. So why not keep the money and set my own terms for it? And I'm very glad I did that.
That's terrific. So if I'm kind of to play that back, you graduated from law school at a time where there weren't a whole lot of jobs, but
Right.
opportunity knocked on your door. You came in contact with someone that says, "Hey, I know another lawyer,
Yeah.
and they've got more work than they can handle." And that probably in your mind went bing, because I've got some loans and I need to get started right away. So it sounds like bankruptcy wasn't necessarily a practice area that you necessarily made a conscious decision you wanted to be in, but it was the one that was in front of you at that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never took a bankruptcy class in law school. They don't, it's not on the bar exam, so there's really no reason for you to learn even the first thing
Right.
about it. I think before my first interview, I went to the library and checked out a book on bankruptcy basics and kind of read up on it so I could
Yeah.
sound fairly intelligent when I went in, but uh, I didn't know the first thing really when I started.
Yeah,
But you got your teeth in it. You began to find that you really liked it, and you could bring tons of value to people who desperately needed some help and guidance in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, 90%, 95% of my cases are successes, meaning they either got a discharge of their debt or they got the result that they
Yeah.
wanted. And, telling people, this process is over, you're debt free, you can move on with your life. Sort of the feeling of relief that comes, it just exudes from them when you tell them that. And they look back at, 3 months ago, my phone was ringing off the hook with debt collectors, or I was,
Yeah.
about to lose my house or my business. And you said, hey, we worked through this process. We restructured your business, and now you can operate and earn a living, and not have to work 14 hours a day to pay debts, right? That there's just a really good feeling uh, that I get. I hope the clients have it times 10 because it really, makes a huge difference for them.
That's
you
great.
talked about the network of the people that you know. Where do most of your clients, like, how do they find you? So ultimately, where are some of your best clients? What are the people that refer them to
I'd
you?
say mostly they come from other lawyers. I get a lot of clients who are, in the either in the midst of litigation or being threatened with litigation, and they don't have the means to fight it. Even if they have a good defense, they're looking at a situation where I could fight this and win, but owe 50,000 to a lawyer, or I could fight it and lose and owe 50,000 to a lawyer, and however much more to a customer or a client or a bank, whoever. And you say, well, bankruptcy is an affordable option that will get this resolved quickly and a fraction of the cost. Uh,
Mm.
so astute lawyers who see that happening and are willing to say, I'll forego the billable hours to get this person out of a tough situation, send them over to Marcus instead. Those tend to be the best, my favorite clients to work with, because there's really a contrast that they can see where, this this was a sinking ship that was costing me a fortune, and now I'm on the other side of it. I didn't spend a fortune, and I got out of it. I didn't have to go to court 100 times. I didn't have to be deposed. Um, so those type of cases usually are good, and sometimes we can use them just as a negotiating tool, sort of for leverage. So I had a client who's a business owner that was being sued by an employee for what she said was unpaid overtime and sexual discrimination. The claims were fairly bogus, but he had paid $80,000 to an attorney's office to defend it, and he was only halfway through. And they
Hmm.
said to him, "You've got a 50-50 chance of winning this case. You could be, and it's going to cost you another 80 grand to get through trial." So he was looking at this as best case scenario, I spend 80 grand. Worst case scenario, I spend 80 grand and owe this person 300,000.
Wow.
We filed a bankruptcy that stopped the litigation, but it didn't permanently stop it, but it put us in a good position to negotiate and show the other side that even if you win, it's not going to be a big windfall for you. And
Hmm.
we ended up getting, I think he ended up paying around $100,000 over a 2-year period, and my fees were, less than 10. So it wasn't the greatest. It wasn't a 100% win, but he wasn't going to get a 100%. He wasn't going to win for nothing anyway. So given the circumstances and the outcomes he was facing, filing the bankruptcy turned out to be best decision he could have made, because it put us in a position to leverage the negotiations to his advantage.
So you're kind of like the pragmatist, Marcus, right? You're going to tell people, you're going to plow through it very quickly, and tell them straight up, what the best thing to do, right? That example that you gave is a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret. My clients don't have huge legal budgets typically. So it's not cost effective for me to lead them down a path that's going to take hundreds of hours of work.
Right.
They and I can resolve situations quickly and easily usually.
So it's interesting stuff, Marcus. I wouldn't have thought of the utilization of bankruptcy for that kind of case. As you were telling it, I was waiting to hear like how that played out, but that's very interesting stuff. So for you and putting together your practice, what are some of the things that were easier than expected in like the first to second year? And what are some of the things on the opposite end that you think were like much harder than you would have planned for?
They're actually the same things. So okay. Getting business, I remember putting together a sort of, budget projections my first year before I started. And it looked kind of like this revenue wise, a steady increase where I figured I'm going to be kind of living off savings for 6 months. And in 2 years, I'm going to be rolling in dough. And it worked out that I sort of hit the ground running. People were calling me, my first week, I want to be your client. And I said, wow, this is easier than I expected. A lot of people in my network reached out to me right away and said, hey, congratulations. We saw your post on LinkedIn. We want to help you. Let us know what we can do. And yeah, for the first year, I felt like was easier than I thought, but it never, I never hit like the, exit propulsion level that I was hoping to get, or I haven't yet, I should say. Yeah. And so it sort of leveled off a little bit where I was like, now I got to really dig, and hit the streets trying to get the business to come in the door. So almost same thing that was surprisingly good has been surprisingly challenging for me.
Interesting.
So the business development was the thing that was, at first it was easier than you expected, but then it became more challenging. So I got to ask you then, why straight out of the gate do you think you had success, like a honeymoon period? Was it to do with the economy at that time? Why did you get off to a fast start like that, do you think?
Because I was working for another firm and I was sort of anticipating that most of the clients would stay with that firm.
Yeah.
But most of them wanted to continue to work with me. And in the months leading up to me leaving, if I spoke to a new client and they were thinking of hiring my firm, I'd say, hey, I'm going to be leaving here in a month or two. So if you want to continue working with me, you should hire me after that rather than hire this firm to do it for you. So that was part of it. And then there were a couple cases I had that were a little more complex than we had initially anticipated. And so they generated additional fees that I wasn't really counting on. And then the last thing, which is always something I'm happy to have, is, somebody does a bankruptcy with me, and then they'll contact me sometime later for some other, issue. Their business has survived, but now they have, an issue with something, or sometimes they're selling the business, or they have a tax problem, or they're being sued by a customer, things like that.
Yeah. So they don't forget that you have helped them in their darkest hour of need when the wolves are at the door.
Right? That's right. Yeah. The person I mentioned about with the employee issue, I'm working with him right now to sell his business.
Well, and what's interesting is your kind of unique understanding of bankruptcy. You can probably like trace it all the way back, and maybe you have some best practices people can do in a business maybe to avoid And I think you were mentioning at some point that your practice is developing to include some of that as some of the offering. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so I've branched out from the bankruptcy area. I'm working more with just businesses from start to finish, and hopefully a good finish rather than a bankrupt finish.
Yeah.
So I'm more and more helping companies get established, set up membership agreements, review their contracts, negotiate leases, kind of just give them general advice on best practices like employment, employee policies, uh, things like that, regulatory stuff, licensing issues. Um, so one thing they say about bankruptcy is it's the last opportunity to be a general practitioner. And that's because you have to know the bankruptcy law, but it touches so many other areas of law that you couldn't help to learn other areas of law if you wanted to. And so I sort of tried to capitalize on that and reach people where they are instead of where they don't want to be.
Yeah.
And I think if I can get to meet small business owners and bring them under my wing, so to speak, earlier, then they might not need to hire me for bankruptcy down the line. Because you're right, you can trace a lot of the things that happen to an earlier event that might have been preventable or avoidable with better planning.
Are you ever surprised by companies that have existed for a long time that maybe lack some of the basic planning related to agreements and how they're structured and stuff like that?
There are so many businesses operating out there where you would just scratch your head at how they've continued to go on. You don't need a license to be a business owner. You don't need any training.
Hmm.
And a lot of the companies I see in bankruptcy are, a carpenter. He's great with a saw. He's great with a hammer, but he's not great with a checkbook. Or,
Oh, wow.
a restaurant owner, great with great cook, very creative, very friendly, but doesn't know how to, can't remember to pay the meals taxes. So
Hmm.
those types of things, or make a budget really is,
Hmm.
a big issue as well. Um, Taking on bad loans, bad debts. There's a whole industry out there, entities that make what are called merchant cash advances, which are really just high interest loans, and
Hmm.
they sink small businesses all the time.
Wow.
Um, so, avoiding things like that, having a relationship with a banker that can get you a line of credit at reasonable terms instead of waiting until the last minute when you're desperate for cash and then taking a bad deal. So all those type of things are things that I want to help small businesses to do to avoid having to make me their bankruptcy attorney, make me your business attorney instead.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm curious because I meet a lot of I meet a lot of lawyers, and it's one thing to be a lawyer, but it's another thing to take that step, right? And you've had this as well, Marcus, as you know, you're suddenly not just a practitioner, but you're a business owner as well.
Mm.
And sometimes, or quite often, you haven't been prepared for that. So I'm really curious, and that in turn creates fear and holds people back, right? But you didn't.
Yep.
You took the plunge. So I'm interested to know what was the catalyst? What was the hair that broke the camel's back that prompted you to say, you know what? I think not only do I think I'm going to do, I'm going to venture out on my own. What was the catalyst? What was the
Uh,
day?
Back to office, back to office policy. So
Yeah.
before I was commuting, pre-COVID, I was commuting, over an hour each way to an
Yeah.
office. We worked from home for a while. That worked out, well enough. But then after a few months, my employer was like, "Yeah, we need to come back to the office," and we weren't set up for remote work really well, and we could have been with a couple small changes to our
Hmm.
IT, and she wasn't willing to do it. She was really, we need to all be in the office every
Hmm.
day, and I just missed that 2 hours plus of not being in the car,
Yeah.
and I just felt like the cost of running a small law practice are not that much.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I calculated, what do people pay? How many cases do I need a month to replace my income? and it just wasn't that much. And I realized I could do at least as well as I was doing in much less time.
Mhm.
And it was whatever I wanted to do with that extra time, whether it was to bring in more business and make more money or just to enjoy more free time,
Yeah.
it would be my choice.
So you'd actually tasted that freedom and said, you know what, I'm not giving this back. Right? You did the
Yeah,
sums.
absolutely.
So we talked there about, some of the challenges, what was easier than you thought. Knowing what you now know, what would you have done differently?
I probably would have been less cost conscious early on. So I was kind of like, I'm going to run on a shoestring budget here and not have any overhead that's not necessary.
Mhm.
And then after a little while, I kind of realized, I'm never going to get beyond where I'm at. I'll be working from home and, making a decent living, but not growing
Yeah,
unless I invest in some more marketing and spend more time on networking and get my name and my face out more.
yeah,
Um, and I didn't look at that as an investment as much as I did as looked at it as an expense.
yeah,
Yeah.
So I think I was very cautious on spending initially,
yeah.
and I would have probably done better just to throw it out there and start with more marketing and things from the get go. Make a bigger splash.
Well, we congratulate you on everything you've done. It's not easy for anybody to go out on their own. It's a big leap. You've done it, and your practice continues to grow. We congratulate you on that, and sharing your story with us was really great. There's some really this. I don't know about you, Don, but I picked up some stuff that
Yeah.
I didn't even really know about bankruptcy. So it's important that people that need your help can contact you. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you? What's how is best to connect people to you?
They can call me 508-202-0681. I'm a lawyer who answers their phone, so you can reach me pretty much anytime. Phone calls get forwarded to me, so even if I'm not in the office, I'll still take the call.
That's really great. Wow, this is awesome. So, Missing Briefs, unveiling the untold story of lawyer triumphs and trials. Thank you for being on, Marques, and we wish you the greatest success.
Thanks for having me,
And,
guys.
and if anyone listening to this out there, maybe they're a lawyer, maybe they have some triumphs or trials that they'd like to share with Missing Briefs, or maybe you know somebody who's kind of in that space and would like to tell their story, have them get in touch with us. I'm Dominic Grew of Elevate Business Coaching.
And I'm Bob Furlong of the Bullfinch Group.
Until we meet again.
Ta.